guys. Hey. Oh yeah, the mic is on. Hello. Thank you. Yeah, it would be nice to. Good morning, everybody. How you doing, guys? I'll get this set up. Oh, perfect. I got a clicker. Let me see. Does this work here? Hopefully it does. Cool. Well, really honored to be here. Have the opportunity to meet all of you. Thank you again to Rafi and to the team at UCLA. Happy to present here with you. And today I will cover a subject that I think is extremely important for any business leader, and that is disruption and disruptive innovation. And I will also try to establish the point that with all the multiple technological advancements available to everybody, innovation and disruption are not only a competitive advantage, but they are actually a necessity to remain in business, because every business and every industry, and actually I would say every job function as well, are being challenged and threatened and are at risk due to companies that are creating disruptive business models. So that's what we're going to cover here in the following 30 or 40 minutes that we have together. And let's see if I can make this work. It does. Perfect. Quick disclaimer. Today I'm here on behalf of myself as an individual, so I won't be officially speaking the views of IBM, my current employer. So I just wanted to share that, right? So these are my personal opinions, of course, based on my experience. I worked for, the past 12 years, worked for Microsoft, Oracle, Salesforce. I've been over 3 years working with IBM, so I have some, perspective. I'm in the business side, on the sales side of the business, right? So I'm not a deeply technical person. However, I have an understanding of business needs and ultimately the value of technology solutions. That sound good? And for this, I want to start our discussion with a company that I think is a great example of what happens with disruption, right? So just with a show of hands, who remembers Towers Records? Okay, great, excellent. In case we have a couple millennials in the audience, can someone just couple words? What did Tower Records do? Sell what? Records. Okay, that's fair, right? So it's the chain of retail stores well beyond the United States, a global chain that used to sell music, right? They were very successful, and they went out of business. And so the question is, what happened to them? Why did they go out of business? Can someone? Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
They waited too long to make themselves obsolete.
They exactly. Yes.
They only say the exact things. I wouldn't say anything.
Good. So yeah, that's what happens to them, and that led to this billboard on their flagship store here in Sunset Boulevard, right here in Los Angeles. So I think it's a relevant example, right? End of the world as we know it. Thank you for your loyalty. And in 2006, they went out of business, right? Again, think about it for a moment. They were the top in their business, right? Extremely successful globally. They were not only a place where people would go to buy the records, but actually they were part of the culture, part of the pop culture. They would bring, rock stars or whatever, and sign autographs and T-shirts. People were very excited to go there. I remember I used to go to Tower Records, and it was a cool experience. Pretty much, you wouldn't go to another store, even if it was a little cheaper, because you wanted to go kind of to the cool place, right? It's like today, I don't know. Many people prefer to pay twice as much to go to Starbucks than to go to Dunkin' Donuts because it's a nicer experience. And so the question is, so who disrupted them? Who took them out of business? Apple, Napster, yes. So the internet, in a way, yes. So all of them are true, right? So it's a series of events, right? There were technological innovations. First, they used to sell records, as someone said. I think you said it. They used to sell records, and then there were tapes, and then there were CDs, And until there, everything is fine, right? Then there were some, I think, some micro CDs, and it was still fine. But then there was the Napster, right? And people could start downloading the music. And so this is like, do I get it for free or do I go and buy the record, right? And then after that, it turned out to be illegal. So Apple came up with that, with the iTunes platform. And people were able to buy the music and have these, iPods and other equivalents. And then after that, there was another disruption, and it was as a service with companies like Pandora and Spotify. So eventually, so while this is happening, in parallel, these guys were very successful, right, in their business. What did they do? They said, well, our business is selling the records in the stores. Let's be more efficient. Let's improve operations. Let's reduce the costs, right? That's what the desperation goes. It is, sell and promotion and so on. But none of that worked because at some point today, even if they give it to you for free, you say, no, thank you, I don't want a CD. I don't need it. So they exactly as you said it right here in the front, right? They became irrelevant because they didn't create the disruption for their own business. And kind of in my view, I would say, they really didn't understand, even though they were super successful, they didn't understand the real business. Think about this. And I'm using an example, but think about your own company. That's the whole point of this discussion. They thought their business was selling records, and it was not. Their business was selling music. And music can be delivered in many different ways. So what the end user cares about is the music, not the record. Some people still do care about the records, but it's another whole other problem, right? But that's experience. So they didn't see, they didn't transform, and therefore they became irrelevant. Now the question, oh, by the way, let me share. There is what I think a fantastic and very, very engaging book by Robert Thirsek named Vaporized. Very good book. And he talks in much depth about this and many other very good examples. Yeah, I think it's a good book to read if this is interesting for you guys. And so he explained this in whole detail, and he uses this term vaporized, right? This company got vaporized by an app at the end of the day. And it's happening across multiple industries, right? So they were not the only ones. I'm accustomed to come back to the computer. So I want you to look at this and process this for a moment. Since the year 2000, over 50% of the Fortune 500 companies have either gone out of business, been acquired, or filed for bankruptcy. And those are the top 500 largest, most successful, with highest revenues in the world companies. And yet, more than half of them, in a matter of a few years, have gone out of business. And so why? Well, most of you may recognize many of these logos right here, right? I guess on your right side of the screen. And it has come to be known as the Uber effect, where the largest transportation taxi company in the entire world doesn't own a single car. And then the Airbnb effect, where one of the largest accommodation companies in the world, by size, they are already comparable to Marriott and to Hilton, right? But these guys don't own a single piece of real estate. Imagine the flexibility that they have compared to Marriott, owning thousands of pieces of real estate with all the problems of, the buildings needing repairs and, all of that. These guys don't deal with that. The largest retailer in the world doesn't carry any inventory. And then being here in Los Angeles, many people, I assume, kind of from the extended entertainment industry, show of hands. 1, 2, 3, okay. So relevant, right? So we have Prime Video, and we have Netflix, and we have all of these companies that are coming and are disrupting companies that would have never imagined. Companies like Disney are at risk now, right? And we would have never imagined that that was even possible, 10 years ago. So this is because these companies are coming and disrupting. And if there is something that all these guys here on your right have in common, is that, number one, they didn't exist before the year 2000. And today they are some of the largest companies in the world by revenue. Number two, they are all app-based businesses. You can be sitting on your couch and get the experience or the service that you expect. You don't need to go anywhere. It's very simple, right? And they don't have all the overhead that other big companies have. So that is the challenge that we all are dealing with. Even the technology companies are being disrupted by other technology companies, right? So well, those are the good ones, right? The ones that disrupt themselves, right? I was working for Microsoft, side note, in 2008 when they were disrupted by Google Apps Premier Edition, right? The Office version in the cloud. And Microsoft made the tough decision of saying, we're gonna go and create Office 365 and cannibalize their second largest business, but that was better than losing it to Google. So they were smart, and that's why Microsoft is still in big business, right? So that's the key. So some questions to think about are, who's next, right? Do you think there is any industry that can be kind of the next industry that will be completely disrupted, like the taxes? Healthcare. Pharmacies, kind of extended, what? Taxes. What was that? Voting. That's an interesting one. Newspaper, absolutely. I mean, they are already, right? So we can go on and on. So the question is, who can be safe? Who's safe from disruption? All right. About the federal government?
So the simplest question would be, which industry is not subject to disruption?
Yeah, so which is this question, right? So who's not subject? Could it be the federal government? I don't know. Let me make it more personal. Are you safe? Is your business safe from disruption? Or your job, right? We need to also be improving our skills to remain relevant because the jobs are changing. I understand most of you kind of work in some kind of technology, kind of IT capacity under the CIO kind of group, right? So the skills need to be improved all the time. And to your point, who can be safe? That's my question. What about the utilities industry, energy and utility? Anyone from energy and utilities here? Just one, two, three people. Okay, 3 people. So in a very simplified way, when you see it in paper, the utility business looks like a great business because they get an assigned territory from the government, right? So they get a local monopoly, so to speak, because there is no other utility that can come and say, I'm gonna serve your exact same territory, right? So they have a protected territory. They also get something called the rate case, which is kind of the return on assets in a simplified way. They get an agreed rate of profitability that they will get at the end of the year. So that sounds great. Are they safe? Let's see. And you may recognize this guy right here, right? Elon Musk and his company, Solar City, which is now part of Tesla. And so companies like Solar City and others are coming into the utility industry with innovative ideas and business models that are taking a piece of that historically extremely safe business, right? Utilities are like 100 years, like PG&E here in Northern California is over 100 years old. Southern California Edison, I don't know exactly, but also around there. They're 100-year-old companies. They've been there, right? But now things are changing due to technology. So there are threats coming from the outside, and then from the inside as well. These are some of the trends that are happening, right? We have smart appliances, again, thanks to technology. So they create more efficient energy consumption. And therefore, it reduces, ultimately, the consumption, the revenue, right? There are consumers creating their own energy and actually being able to sell the surplus. Companies like this, right? The solar panels and so on. At the same time, we have a very strict regulatory environment, right? You can attest for that. But it is changing, and now is adapting to the new environment and is opening for new potential business models, and that opens the door for other companies to come and disrupt. And there is a bunch of other things, right? Electric vehicles, which are changing the consumption patterns of electricity, and a series of other things. Consumers that are empowered by our cell phones and expect a different type of relationship from the utility beyond a once-a-month bill, right? So the point here is that, yes, the utility industry, which you would think on paper that is a very safe industry, is at risk of disruption, and they need to they need to become digital businesses that have a better relationship with their clients and that create their own disruptions. Go ahead. Absolutely. Yeah, there are devices like Nest and many other things, right, where you can do like, again, manage your home even if you are in another country, right, remotely from your phone. There are many things happening, disrupting the industry. So kind of the whole point here is, yes, absolutely, there are things, this industry is being disrupted, all others are. And I have a couple examples. This is from last year. Some of you may remember there was, during the summer in Australia, there was very high temperatures. So people, of course, put their air conditioning all across the country, and the grid, the electric grid couldn't support, and there were a bunch of power outages, right? So at some point, the prime minister declared an energy crisis across the country. So what happens? Elon Musk goes on Twitter and says, don't worry, I'll solve your problem. And out of the sudden, he's trying to take a piece of this utilities business, which historically nobody has been there, right, competing with them. And they go on a back and forth, and eventually he says, you know what, I will, so they tell him, how serious are you about this? And says, oh, I will solve it in 100 days, or it's for free. How's that for serious, right? And so I was actually looking at so this is a little older, but I was looking online. And then, a few months after that, actually Tesla announced that they were going to build the largest lithium-ion, battery farm in the world in Australia to help with the energy crisis. And there you go, they took a piece of the business, right? Yeah, so that, and then and again, another example, right? This is actually from 2 years ago. There was this fund that that was created by about 27 very high-profile, high-tech business leaders, led by Bill Gates. Mark Zuckerberg is there. The owner of Alibaba, I don't remember his name, and a bunch of other guys at that level, right? What is his name? Yeah, yes, exactly. So about 20-something, high-tech business leaders created this fund, started with $1 billion, then infused more money to do research on energy storage. And what they're trying to do is to convert solar energy directly into liquid energy and store it. Very nice. They are not doing this for the love of art or for the love of science. This is a multi-billion-dollar business, and they are coming and they are taking their own, share of it. So again, disruption coming from the outside due to technology. So that was all about, again, an example that we chose on ENU, but this, hopefully, you can kind of relate in your own businesses and industries, right? So now I want to share my view of what are some of the characteristics of disruptive innovation. This is by no means the ultimate extensive list. You may have additional points, but I think these ones are at least relevant, right, for disruption. The first point is, let's clarify. So disruption versus iteration, right? Iteration is a process that improves over time. It's an evolutionary process, right? Disruption is not. It's something that comes completely unexpected. And so one of them is that it creates an entirely new paradigm of what is possible, right? Cloud computing is an example of this. If you would think 15 years ago that some of the largest banks in the world and even agencies of the federal government and healthcare companies would be trusting all of their data to some vendor like IBM or like Microsoft, you wouldn't believe it, right? And today is a reality. So the cloud computing business model disrupted a business, right, for the traditional software companies like SAP and others, right? IBM itself, Microsoft itself were disrupted, but they were able to transition and change rapidly. Another point is it provides benefits, which is kind of what I said, by a revolution, not by an evolution, right? Is again, trying to go many years back. Maybe this example won't sound very innovative today, but it was 100 years ago, right? When the assembly line was created. So before in manufacturing, people would kind of build a whole car. So the guy would be building this and then go here and do the other part and do the other part. And it's attributed to Henry Ford. If there were other people involved, I'm sure. But the point is, someone there said, what if we hyper-specialize people on a function, right? Instead of trying to make them work extra hours or something to improve production. And the results were incredible. It created a revolution, right? So so that's an example, right? Another one could be, again, airplanes. So the evolution of transportation, the natural evolution once we have cars is, well, we have a car, let's make a bigger car or a faster car or a better car in any possible way, and you keep focused on the kind of what it is. But someone said, no, what if we can fly? And again, if you would imagine that, there would be, I don't know how heavy they are, but they're, a few tons heavy, right, the airplanes. And maybe more than a few. Flying with, 200 people, transatlantically, you wouldn't imagine that, 100 years ago, right? So that was a revolution, and that was a disruption in that industry. It also redefines a business model in a way that the existing paradigm becomes pretty much irrelevant, right? Think about it. And to that point, think of the sharing economy, right? Think of the sharing economy. So it's a completely different business model where now, instead of going and buying something, you can, for example, here is where, Uber, right? And have you guys seen these new scooters, the Bird, that are, probably, actually, they are here on campus, right? So you don't need to go and buy a scooter or a bike or whatever. You share, right? So that's a very good example of a new business model there. And then another characteristic is that the strength on the old business model becomes actually a weakness. Think about this for a moment. If you are the company that owns 100 or 1,000 trucks, right? Well, it is precisely because you own 1,000 trucks that out of the sudden you become very slow to compete with a guy who doesn't own any trucks and comes up with some app, two guys, right? That stored in the cloud, paying nothing and growing as they go. And so whatever made you strong, this is a great example of, again, our guys from Tower Records, right? They became irrelevant. And their strength became their weakness. And then the fifth point here is that, which I think is extremely important, disruptive innovation is outcome-oriented, not process-oriented. And perhaps as you think on what you guys are doing at your own companies, are you focused on improving your same process? Are you thinking like Tower Records? Right? That's a good question to ask ourselves. Does this sound relevant as some characteristics of disruption? Questions, comments there? All good? Okay, perfect. Speechless, perhaps. So with that, now I want to kind of briefly go over some of the technologies that can be considered disruptive. A comment here.
I think if I summarize everything you said, which is profound, if people really focus on what the purpose is, one simple word, many of those things will not happen. If railroad didn't say we are in the railroad business, but we are in transporting goods, anything you want to go or take something.
Exactly.
You're not stuck. Why do you want to buy a railroad? Why do you want to build a track?
Exactly.
They did build them because they got from the United States government all the land. That was a
Yes.
good investment.
Yes.
That was good. But I think if you just focus constantly, is the purpose still relevant? You
Yes.
started with records. No, they were selling music.
They were selling music, exactly.
Enjoyable,
Yeah.
not music. Good for the ears. I don't care if it's music or words. Maybe you extend it by just focusing on purpose and change it if it's not relevant.
Exactly. No, that's exactly the whole point here, right? To focus on the ultimate experience of the user, right? How are you going to change it? And so some of the technologies that are enabling this to happen, one of them is cloud computing. Again, this is not new news. It's been here for over 10 years, give or take, right? And that's a new standard. And it started first as a way to achieve savings, and then to gain efficiencies, and then to gain speed and scale. Today, cloud computing is really an enabler. It's not anymore the destination of businesses. It's the enabler for all the other stuff to happen, right? So technologies build on each other. That's why it's an exponential growth. So cloud computing, I don't think there is much kind of to talk about it. Probably everybody here, and I think familiar with the subject, right? To some extent. And again, this is an overview. We cannot go in depth, with anything beyond that. But cloud computing certainly has been a disruptive technology. Another one, very interesting, artificial intelligence, right? And the disruption here is that since the invention of software programs were coded, were programmed to perform a very specific function, and that's it. Today, with the development of artificial intelligence and all of these, right, machine learning, deep learning, neural networks, all kind of encompassing artificial intelligence, it's still software programs, but as you feed them with data, they start to learn, and they do it in a very effective way when it comes to rational learning, if you will, better than we humans do, right? They have the computational power, the certainty. If you feed them with the right data, they don't have the bias that humans have. They're very effective. And now they're having skills to learn, for example, to understand based on the data. And the data can be voice, right? There is a speech to text, so you can actually talk to the software and then it processes, and we can say understands, right? And because it's been trained, and it can understand that you are upset when you're calling a call center. And it can say, this person is really upset. They can know the sentiment. They can know the intent. Are you ready to buy, or are you just kind of kicking tires? It's getting very advanced. So artificial intelligence is very interesting, for sure. And then another concept, quantum computing. Show of hands, who's familiar with quantum computing? Many people. So this is kind of technically new. That's great. So this is kind of a relatively one of the newest technologies. There are actually, that I know, there is one kind of commercial offering of quantum computing, and that happens to be from IBM. It's IBM Q, available on the IBM Cloud. But this is very early stage technology, right? The big companies are investing in it. And in very simple terms, I don't pretend to be a physicist, but in very simple terms, this applies the principles of quantum physics and quantum mechanics to software. So quantum physics, right, it explains that the matter at the subatomic level behaves in a different way than it does at the plus atomic level. Just give me 1 second to finish the point for everyone. So at that subatomic level, a particle, a little particle within an atom, can be somewhere and somewhere else, or in both places at the same time, the same particle. Can be something and something else. That's kind of, let's leave it there. But at the super high level, that's not the idea to go into quantum physics here. That's what it is. So that principle of something or something else or both is applied in quantum computing with these mega computers. And so now, on the traditional computing, kind of, we went from analog to digital, and now from digital to quantum, right? So the qubits, which are the equivalent of bits, right, can now, through this concept called superposition, which is what I just explained, can be a 0 or a 1 or both. And when you exponentialize that to all the qubits, the millions of qubits, you have a computational power that is incredibly, pretty much unimaginable based on what we are accustomed to see up until today. So this opens possibilities in many fields in business, like medicine, for example, to untangle the chemical composition and create new drugs or uncover new materials. In financial services, think about having the capacity to do these calculation models that today are impossible, to understand, to isolate risks, and provide the best investment option. To even beyond that, to anticipate a potential crisis like the real estate bubble that we had, because if we have looked at all the data and said this is not right, this is inflated. So anticipate inflation, anticipate crises like the dragon effect and all of that stuff that happened many years ago. maybe quantum computing will help humanity with that. So it's very interesting. It's still kind of, it's not there happening yet, but this is cooking, it's happening, right? Because even for artificial intelligence, back to my point, computers, technologies build on each other. So now with quantum computing, these very advanced computers will allow artificial intelligence to have much more computing power to analyze big sets of data like video or images, and way beyond that, to study the universe and understand the stars, and beyond the stars, the galaxies, right? And help us understand a different magnitude of the entire universe. Those are just possibilities that quantum computing offers, and I find that fascinating. You had a comment.
Yeah. Since you mentioned quantum, it all started a long, long time ago with somebody called Schrodinger's equations, the physicist of the last century. He had a story of a box and a cat, and I will not go very far.
Yes, thank you.
The cat is dead, the cat is alive.
Oh, yes,
no, the
yes.
cat is both.
Yes, that's experiment. Yeah, so that's
precipitated the whole thing. That's the quantum physics part.
yeah, so that's an experiment that explains the point that I said, the superposition, right? There can be, quantum physics gets weird, right? There can be multiple universes. In one, the cat can be alive, and another one can be dead. It can be both. Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead. Neural networks. Which so again, just kind of keeping and say all of those are like different terms, within the kind of extended concept of artificial intelligence. So 3 very interesting disruptive technologies that are available today, even quantum computing. And then there are so many others, right? That I don't have the time to go over all of them, but there are electric vehicles and self-driving vehicles that are, of course, disrupting the transportation industry, and robotics that bring new possibilities for certain jobs. Imagine humans carrying boxes while a robot can carry. There are robotic enhancements for humans. I saw something that a person can wear this kind of robotic thing and help them, lift much more weight, which I find it kind of weird. But then it has good applications. So a person who's, paralyzed, quadriplegic, can wear this thing and have the sensation of being able to move. Fantastic possibilities, right? And then bio and nanotechnology, Internet of Things that you mentioned, which connected with artificial intelligence, there are many interesting use cases where we're working with some of those kind of combinations of technologies, right? For new possibilities, completely new possibilities for business models. Microservices, containers, the whole mobile economy, virtual reality, augmented reality, provide so many possibilities that, again, we cannot cover all of them here, but I think is fascinating. Then another one, which is blockchain, which in this audience, pretty much everybody kind of is, should I ask, show of hands, familiar with blockchain? Also kind of half of the audience, anyone working on blockchain or has a blockchain implementation in your company? Show of hands. So then that's different, right? Many companies are in the stage of curiosity, right? Some people in the blockchain world call it blockchain tourism, right? So exploring, looking, but not necessarily implementing yet. There are, however, companies that are already implementing blockchain for real. By the way, my LinkedIn profile says blockchain, and literally every day I get invited to all of this blockchain stuff. Companies, and they invite me to invest. There's like a public offering every day. There are like thousands of blockchain companies, blockchain-related companies for all kinds of funny things. But the reality is that there are very few companies that are actually capable of offering enterprise-grade, secure, business-ready blockchain solutions. You have a comment there. Yes. I'll share a few right now. So perfect, very valid question. And indeed, companies kind of come to us and say, okay, we're very interested. I'm talking to people who have a blockchain titles already, right? So, in blockchain divisions and so on, but they don't have a project. And then, I'm in sales, right, ultimately. So when we're trying to actually sell it, it's like, well, no, not ready yet, right? So they have the title, they have the whole thing, but they're not buying it, they're not using it. But it will come. Actually, so Ginny Rometty, our CEO at IBM, said recently publicly that blockchain will do to trusted transactions what the internet did to communications. It will have a profound impact in life beyond Bitcoin. Bitcoin right now, again, is it speculative? Will it change the world? Will it replace money? I don't know. I don't want to speculate that. It will have a place. Bitcoin will have a place in the world. It already has it, right? But that's another story. Blockchain is the underlying technology that enables Bitcoin, but it can enable other 300 different use cases. Bitcoin is just one of the use cases of blockchain. So with that, what is blockchain? And again, sorry for those who are kind of blockchain experts. This is, again, high level. But in very simple terms, it started all with a ledger. A ledger is a place where you book transactions. And that's the way humanity has been tracking transactions since the time we were able to write, right? So we exchange anything of value, and I write, I gave you this, you gave me that, right? You start to keep your record. Then about, give or take 30, 40, 50 years ago, there is software, and then you can track that on a software-based database, a little bit more advanced. But I still have mine, you have yours, right? So blockchain is that. It's a distributed ledger to record transactions with some additional valuable capabilities that enable these new business models. So when we look at this is the world before blockchain, and actually this is a extremely simplified slide, because the reality, so let's assume you here are company A, and then you there are company B, and then you are a supplier, and then you are a client, and then you are the bank, and then you are some auditor, and so on, right? So each of you keeps your record of the transaction that is happening. The reality is, you company A, right? You were company A, right? You don't have only one supplier or one client. You have 7,000 clients, 50 suppliers, 30 business partners, and so on. So this is so completely a mess, right, of all the things that are going on. So what blockchain, so of course this becomes inefficient, an inefficient process. There is a lot of duplication, which makes it expensive, right? All the cost that comes with it is very vulnerable, because someone here, I'm not going to say who, but someone here may want to tamper with the information, right? And say that they received less than what they did or whatever. It happens. Or it may just be a human error. So when you have blockchain, what it does is the architecture of the technology allows for all the participants to have the exact same record at the exact same time, and it is time-stamped of that transaction that happens. So now when you sell something to him or receive something from your supplier or whatever is the transaction, everybody on that specific network gets access to that very unique piece of information that is time-stamped. It is, thanks to cryptology, it is secured. And a very important point, by the way, let's please not get into details of this, but there is anonymous blockchain technology, and there is permissioned blockchain technology. And here I can say the official view of IBM is that it should be permissioned, right? Because when you do business, you don't want anonymity. You want to know who you're doing business with. So for business, blockchain for business, there are permissions. You know who is who, and you have the permissions to say, within that same blockchain that you create, you say, well, there are certain steps that the bank or the auditor don't need to know, right? There are certain steps that my business partners don't need to know. But other steps of the same process on the same blockchain that they do. So cryptology enables for that to happen. And then again, the fact that you have this blockchain with these people, you can have over 300 blockchains with other people for other reasons, right? Go ahead. Everyone on that network, and you can, give them access to your blockchain. So you can give some people access to your blockchain. He doesn't need to buy it necessarily, kind of go to IBM and buy it. You're buying it from us, and you give him access. It's an example, right? Now, he can buy it as well, right? So there are many possibilities, but the point is you create this network, and it has many, many, many benefits, right? So it works by consensus, which means at least 51% of the participants on that network kind of consent. They attest, they say, yes, this indeed happened, boom, and it gets time-stamped. Provenance is the history, right? Where did the asset come from? And that's very important, and I'll show it in one of the examples to your question right there, right? Coming soon. And then immutability doesn't mean that it cannot change. it means that it cannot be tampered with. That's a very important point to clarify there. So you do a transaction by error or by whatever, you can create the next one that clarifies what happened, but both of them get recorded with everyone. So that's very important because there is nobody, in the network that can come do something, they receive a good, an asset or whatever, and then they say, no, it didn't happen. No. If they received it, it's recorded with everyone, and if they change it, now everyone has the record that that was changed back. That's what immutability means. Finality is kind of the ultimate objective of the whole blockchain thing, which is there is just one source of the truth, which is very important. Right? There is one ledger. Hopefully, this makes sense at a high level on how the technology works. And then, because you asked, oh, actually, one more. So some of the high-level benefits, right? It kind of becomes obvious, I think, at this point. It helps you save time. It's a much more efficient process. It removes costs because it's a more efficient process. It reduces risk because we explained it's encrypted and there is just one version of the truth. And then all of that helps increase trust between parties that wouldn't trust each other otherwise and without the need of intermediaries. So that opens many possibilities. Go ahead. Thank you.
I think that as we move forward with these different disruptive models, that's going to become one of the very defining factors. Because if you look at something like Uber, yes, the technology enabled it, yes, but it also somehow got people to trust getting in a stranger's car.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think it's just going to become bigger and bigger, like the Internet of Trust instead of the Internet of Things.
Yes, yeah, no, that's actually a great term, and indeed, it creates trust. And that's a key concept, and I'm going to mention it now in one of the examples that should come here. Yes. So some use cases. Again, as I said at the beginning, I'm not here selling IBM, but I do work for IBM, and it happens to be the company that has the most blockchain real business implemented use cases, right? It was the first one to do it. It's the one that has the most. So this is an example with IBM in partnership with Walmart. And it started first in China. Walmart wanted to trace back pork meat, right? And for food recalls. And the food recalls are something very important. So a company like Walmart, so if, let's say, someone goes buy something and they get sick of salmonella or whatever, they go and say, well, there are all of these, whatever the product may be. It can be some vegetable or something, meat. It's coming from a bunch of different farms, from different places, from different countries. What do? Do you recall all of it and lose all the money, or you leave it there? Of course, they recall all of it because they're not going to risk killing anyone else. But there's very significant cost for the company, and then of course it's bad for people, right? Because you are at the risk of not knowing where the food comes from and so on. So they started with this idea of tracing back, so for traceability, and then it was successful. They in this continued partnership. This is a real. I'm talking about real implementations, right? This is real business, global networks. They invited companies like Nestle and Unilever and all of their distributors and suppliers globally. It keeps growing, and it's a fantastic network for food safety, for food recalls, and then the possibilities keep growing because now it's not there yet. You're not seeing it yet, but at some point, I know we're going to see it. You're going to go to the grocery store, and you will be able to scan with your phone and know where your piece of food came from, right? Where did it come from? Which country, for real, came from? What was the supply? What was the temperature at which, because with the Internet of Things, at which temperature has it been stored? You can know all of that, right? Many of people say like, oh, I'm organic and I am gluten-free and all of this stuff. Is it really what you're eating? Is it really organic, right? So you'll be able to trace how your, whatever chicken were fed for people who care about that, right? You will be able to know it. So ultimately, to your point there is, I think it's the COO of Walmart or senior executive working on this, said the ultimate value of this network is not just traceability, but this transparency, right? So people can trust what they are eating, which I think is a pretty important point, I would say. So that's a great example, real business implementation of blockchain. Another one here, global trade, the whole distribution of global trade, a consortium that started with Maersk. Maersk is the largest company in the world for transportation of these containers that we know these standard containers that go, over the ocean. And interestingly enough, 90%, over 90% of the global trade in the world happens through those little containers. 90% of the goods that go back and forth around the world. And so, of those, another very interesting fact, the cost that it takes to get, so let's say roses, right? Roses are imported from, South America and Asia and places, for example, here to the US and Europe and everywhere, right? From one place to another. Within one country, they are exported from the south to the north. So there are billions of, I don't know, remember, many millions of cubic tons of roses transported every year. And it's an over I think it's $105 billion business. Just side note, just transporting roses. So that's a huge business. You wouldn't think of it that way, all right? So the cost of getting those roses or anything else from, say, anywhere in Mexico to, here in the US, is more than 50% of that cost is the actual administrative and paperwork and operational cost and the cost of the actual good that is inside of the container. Well, so with blockchain, this partnership with IBM, what they are doing is improving efficiencies on the paper trails. There are more than 20 points. It goes from one port, there is one paper, so someone signs, and everything is handwritten. And from there goes to another point of a check. And then they move the container from one barge to another. A series of things happen, like 27 steps there, right? To get, the rose from, to Thailand to somewhere in Europe, to France. So through blockchain, you can now, having kind of explained high level how the blockchain works, you can kind of picture that all of that network of all of these parties involved having access of all of the right information. It also reduces fraud. There is a lot of fraud happening. People in the ports of entry, there's a lot of corruption. Right? They steal part of the merchandise. There's a lot of corruption all over the world. Here in the US as well. Right? There's a lot of corruption everywhere. So through blockchain, you can have that real one version of the truth. So it improves efficiencies, reduces costs, all what we talked about in the previous slide. Very good use case, I think, real business case. Another one, global diamonds. IBM partnered with a company called Everledger. And so for the whole supply chain of diamonds, right? Some people might have seen this Bloody Diamond movie, right? So through applying blockchain, you can know exactly, again, the provenance, where the asset came from, and where it goes, the whole kind of history of the asset. You can understand, they actually created like a digital, they call it a digital thumbprint of the diamond. And so there are these, what is this, IAG, I think, the agencies that certify the quality of the diamond and so on. Now it's going to be, eventually, it's going to be blockchain. And it's like the ultimate certificate of your kind of engagement diamond ring, right? And then the possibilities expand to all kinds of luxury goods, art, blockchain art. And I think we should blockchain guns, right? Makes sense. Where did it come from, right? Blockchain wine, all kinds of luxury goods, many possibilities there. Actually, IBM internally uses blockchain in the IBM Global Financing, which is the financing arm of IBM. It finances billions of dollars a year. And there are many disputes, like in any company, it's normal process. There are billions of dollars there. And so the dispute time takes many days. Now with the implementation of blockchain, it's improving efficiencies to only a few hours in some of the cases, releasing the money. So it's better for the business partners, it's better for IBM. And then really, you name it, right? It can apply to, real estate in many countries, people, kind of developing countries, people don't have title to the real estate. So without the need of a central agency that are very corrupt in many countries, you can have an actual, real, verified title of ownership of your property that you can pass along. So these are possibilities that are coming, that are being enabled by this technology. So as you see, beyond Bitcoin, there are many real business applications of blockchain. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, so if anyone is interested, pretty much you can go to ibm.com/blockchain, and you can look for a bunch of real cases and applications there. So those are some of the examples that I got here for you. And then just some books if that I would recommend. I said Vaporized by Robert Thirsak. Human Plus Machine by Paul Doherty. I had the opportunity to meet him at a CIO event recently. He is a Chief Innovation Officer for Accenture. So very interesting book. Behind the Cloud by Benioff. I was thinking there is another one. The Innovator's Dilemma is very relevant to this presentation. The Innovator's Dilemma is precisely the whole problem of Tower Records, right? And actually, I posted a list of my 100 favorite books on my LinkedIn. So if you go to my LinkedIn and my posts, you can find it there. Some of the books that I've read over the years about many subjects. So that's all I got for you guys. Thank you. You can find me there online. Thank you.